Hello, everybody. This is Jake Senziano, host of the Jake and Gino podcast. Here with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, the chef, the father, six, the best-selling author, the G-Daddy, Gino Barber. Gene, how's it going?
Mr. Senziano, there is no better way to start the morning than doing a podcast with you, my friend. How you doing?
It's like Folgers in your cup, baby. We got this. All right. Always making it happen, big man. Today's guest is the author of Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. His specialty is the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. So without further ado, Nir Eyal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
It is our pleasure. Please tell us a little bit about your background and how you became an expert on engagement and habit-forming products.
Sure. So let's see. So I'm what you call a behavioral designer. So I help companies build the kind of products and services that create healthy habits in users' lives. So I taught for many years at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and then later at the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design, where I researched and students how to design the kind of products that people get hooked to. And the idea was to democratize many of the techniques that you see companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, WhatsApp, Slack, Snapchat, these companies that are so good at getting us hooked. My idea was, well, what if we could, share that insight with the rest of us? What if all of us could build the kind of products and services that people use because they want to, not because they have to? And so that's why I wrote Hooked, was to help the rest of us, build the kind of businesses that bring the customers back without spammy advertising and annoying messaging, but the kind of products that people use out of habit. So that was my first book. That was about how to build good habits. My second book, which was recently released, is called Indistractable: How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. And that book is the other side of the coin. That looks.
I was going to say that sounds like the opposite there. Yeah,
it's not the opposite. I would say it's complementary. So Hooked is about how to build good habits. Indistractable is about how to break bad habits. So I wrote that book because I was crazy distracted, right? Like I would sit down at my desk and I would say, okay, now I'm gonna do that blog post, or I'm gonna do that thing I said I was gonna do. And 20, 30, 45 minutes later, I'm scrolling and emailing and checking Slack channels, whatever, as opposed to the thing I said I was gonna do, doing the hard work that needs to get done. And the more successful I became, the more demands there were on my time. So I was neglecting my health. I would say I was going to exercise, but I wouldn't. I would say I was going to eat right, but I didn't. I would spend time with my kids, but be on my phone all the time. And finally, I said, enough. Like, this is no way to live. I got to figure out how to break these bad habits around distraction. And I'm the guy who wrote the book on how these products do it. So I wanted to kind of reverse engineer and figure out how to unwind it as well. Stop getting distracted. Yeah, exactly. And it's changed my life in every conceivable way.
Nir, how did you get into this I guess the space as far as trying to hook people? Because there's morality to it. I'd love to get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, sure.
We definitely should. A little bit of your background.
Yeah. So probably all started because I used to be fat. That's the truth. I used to be clinically obese. Today I'm not. Today I'm 43 years old. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm not saying this to brag, but I have six-pack abs. I've never had that before, not because I'm genetically gifted, but because I do what I say I'm going to do. I hit the gym consistently and I eat right consistently. And I never did that before, ever, because I always felt like things controlled me, right? My schedule controlled me, food controlled me, stress controlled me, everything controlled me. And I got into this field to understand, well, how do they do it? Thinking like, wow, like I want that power to control my customers. And it turned out that actually the control that we think companies have actually is much less than is the truth. And when I used to be clinically obese, I
elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah,
on the company control piece. Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to love to blame the food companies. So when I was obese, I would say, oh, it's McDonald's that's doing it to me. It's the sugar industry. It's the this, it's the that. And I'll tell you what, it's not true.
We need to look in the mirror sometimes, right? And say that gut down there might have a little bit more to, self-responsibility on it than I'm giving it credit for, right? Yeah.
Listen, the reason I was overweight was because I ate too much and I ate the wrong stuff. And I wish I could say I ate because I was hungry, but I didn't eat because I was hungry. I ate because I was eating my feelings, right? I was eating because I was bored. I was eating because I was lonely. I was eating because I felt ashamed at how much I had just eaten.
I was stressing for a couple of years. I was just like, I was busy and I'd be like, it would be a distraction to go out and just get away from it for a minute. And it was like,
oh my God,
I've broken that.
Absolutely.
Chain, yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I'm Italian.
Absolutely.
Italians love to eat. So we eat all the time. So although we eat really small portions, we eat healthy portions. It's part of our
I'm eating
DNA.
all the time now, but it's like I've changed what's being consumed, and that's the difference. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, especially during this pandemic, with as levels of stress increase,
Mm-hmm.
the way we use products to escape stress is critical to understanding this, right? This is what we call an internal trigger. So there's two kinds of triggers to action, to any behavior. We have external triggers and we have internal triggers. External triggers are all the stuff outside of you, right? The pings, dings, rings, all those things outside of you. Studies find, however, that's only 10% of the time that you get distracted is it because of an external trigger. So you know how people say, oh, I was going to make my sales calls. I was going to follow up on leads, but I got distracted. My phone rang. Well, it's actually, those are the external triggers, right? Turns out that's only 10% of the time you get distracted, 10%. So what's the other 90%? The research finds that 90% of the time that we go off track, it's because of what we call an internal trigger. An internal trigger is an uncomfortable emotional state that we seek to escape from. So loneliness, boredom, fatigue, stress, anxiety, uncertainty. That's 90% of the time you check your phone or stress eat or do something else that
the healthier you are internally, the more productive you're going to be ultimately. Yeah.
That's a big part of it. So the good news is we can learn how to master those internal triggers so they don't become our master.
And Jake, I'm going to throw in a little life coaching here. Very, very, I guess, complementary to life coaching because 90 to 95% of our energy blocks are internal. Limiting beliefs, assumptions, interpretations, the gremlins in our voice. 90% of our internal, 5 to 10% are external. It's the economy, it's the president, it's the pandemic. The majority of it is internal. So what Nir is saying, everybody, is you have control of your thoughts. You have control of your feelings. You don't. Nir, I read the book.
Hold on, Gino, 1 second. I just want, before we get there, I want to go to the negative snowball on the flip side of that is because he was talking about, just before we got on a little bit about the pandemic. And if you look at how this can go in the wrong direction, we're in multifamily housing and, so we'll buy aluminum and, metal roofing at times. It's hard to get right now. Aluminum fencing is hard to get. Do you know why?
Don't know why. Why?
Beer is through the roof from the pandemic. So no, but it's true. So I'm not bullshitting, guys. Aluminum is like in high demand right now because of beer. So think about this. People are stuck in their homes. They're going in the wrong direction internally. They're probably, a little sad, depressed. They have these other things. And then they turn to these things like alcohol, which is now soaring through the roof, and you start to really go in the wrong direction there. So it
was an essential need. Alcohol and drugs were an essential need.
We're going down a rabbit hole, but I got you. I'm
just saying that's what ended up happening. They made that. So I read the book. There's so much great information in this book, and the thing that really stuck out to me. Listen to this. How is it possible that 1/3 of all people rather give up sex than lose their phone? I just want it makes sense to me. My phone is gone. I threw it in the garbage for the rest of the week. I'd rather lose that bad boy than lose the intimacy with my wife. Explain to me how habit forming and how dangerous, it can be this cell phone that we have in our hands or in our pocket all the time.
It can be very habit forming. How dangerous is a different question. I used to think they were more dangerous. I used to tell people stuff like, the technology is like the cigarette of the century and things like that. And I don't believe that anymore. I think that's
what came out yesterday with the Facebook whistleblower, right? That was the comparison, the tech companies to big tobacco, right?
Yeah, I would compare it to any form of media. Look, if you watch too many movies, that's bad for you. If you watch too much sports, on TV, that's bad for you. If you read too many books, that's bad for you. So there's anything that you do that is taking you away from what you plan to do. So this is really important. So we have to define what is distraction. What are we talking about here when we talk about distraction? So ask yourself, what's the opposite of distraction? What do you think? What's the opposite of distraction?
What would be focused?
You don't want to be distracted. Right? You want to be
focused,
you're present, engaged,
focused, right?
Yes.
Not exactly. Most people say what you say. The opposite of distracted is focused. But actually, if you look at the origin of the word distraction, the opposite is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. Traction and distraction.
Oh, okay.
They both come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And you'll notice that both words end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N. That spells action, reminding us that distraction is not something that happens to us. It is an action we take. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, things that you do with intent, things that move you closer to your goals and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Those are acts of traction. The opposite is distraction, anything that pulls you away from what you plan to do, anything that is further away from your values, further away from your goals. So you have traction and distraction. Now, here's the kicker. I argue anything can be traction or distraction based on one word. And that one word is forethought. Okay. Forethought. So just because something is a work-related task doesn't mean it's not a distraction. I know in your industry, right? So if it's I got to make those sales calls, I got to follow up on those leads, I got to do this work. I'm going to do it. Nothing's going to get in my way. I'm going to do the top thing on my to-do list. Here I go. I'm going to get focused. But first, let me just check email real quick. Right? Does that ever happen to anybody? You got that one thing you've been delaying.
Everybody's,
Everybody does that, right? So just because a task is worky, just because it's work related, doesn't mean it's not a distraction. That's the most dangerous kind of distraction, the kind that tricks you into prioritizing the urgent and the easy work at the sacrifice of the important and hard work that we have to do to move our lives and careers forward. That's, just because something is a work related task doesn't mean it can't be a distraction. That's the worst kind of distraction. And conversely, just because something is, Facebook or video games or whatever, oh, that's bad. That's melting your brain. You should stop doing that. BS. Anything you want to do with your time. You want to watch YouTube videos? Go for it. You want to play video games? Enjoy. We shouldn't tell each other, kind of moralize and medicalize these behaviors. They're perfectly fine as long as you do it on your schedule and according to your values, not somebody else's, certainly not the tech companies. So if people want to play, people want to watch, why is watching football on TV somehow morally inferior or superior to playing video games? I don't know. It's the same thing as long as it's what you want to do with your time.
I want to jump in here for a second because I think there is a shift that's going on right now. And part of and this is a challenge. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I just got into this. It's a hunter-gatherer's guide to the 21st century. It's an interesting book talking about how rapidly technology is changing our lives and how we're struggling to adapt because it's going at light speed. So I think that's a component of what we're dealing with right now. And the other thing is the length of the content. And again, I'm not making a right or wrong or moral argument here, but I'm just discussing the impact on humanity. You're talking about short little dopamine hits because everyone's content is shorter. We used to watch a movie, might have been an hour and a half. This stuff's being reduced to like these little like micro ads that are being pushed, and we're consuming and Instagram, we're taking it on. So I think there is an impact on society. That's why I'm just interested in how this Facebook sort of whistleblower stuff develops, because they're talking about how it was so addictive, especially to young girls and some of the stuff on Instagram. I don't know that it wasn't, right?
If you look at the research, it's fascinating. If you look at the slides, like if you actually go see what was leaked, they did a survey of 20 people and they asked them, do you feel better, worse, or somewhere in between? And it turns out that a small group of people that they asked said it made them feel worse. Most felt better or nothing. No. And let me ask you, if you ask teenage girls, how do you feel after watching the cable news or going to school? You're going to get the same reaction. So this headline, I think, is incredibly irresponsible of, oh, it makes people depressed. Look, some people.
I wasn't going there with it though. Let me just finish my thought, because I think ultimately it's changes in how it's impacting humans and our behaviors and things, and whether we can catch it. I haven't even finished the book yet, so I found it interesting. And I'm interested to basically see what their conclusion is ultimately, because it's basically saying things are happening at a more of a rapid pace than we're able to keep up with right now. Maybe true, maybe not. Not make an argument for one or the other. The one thing that I will say that I personally believe is true is that the harm of this is that it potentially could be manipulated by other countries, foreign powers, whatever the case may be, and there's a clear desire to divide humanity, and it's polarization through politics and some of this stuff. And I think it's the whole word triggered is just interesting to me, because it's come out over the years, and people are using that as like an entitlement speech, almost like you did this to me and now it's impactful. So I just think the biggest harm ultimately is the division that it makes amongst us as humans, because I think a lot of this stuff, if someone were to actually sit down and speak something like you and I are having a conversation right now, we could probably find some sort of common ground on these things. But I think that's the true danger. So I'll be interested to see, where that ultimately goes. But I'm with you. Like, I'm not saying that, someone, if they want to consume football just because it's a quote unquote longer form content is healthier. I do think there could be something there to say, hey, how quickly is this stuff evolving, and how will we do as a species to keep up with it? So my 2 cents on it. I just,
No, I think, there's a wonderful quote by Paul Virilio who said, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. Every new technology is going to have downsides, especially a technology that's touching billions of people like the internet. Of course, there's downsides, but there's a hell of a lot of upsides, right? Like here we are, like you're.
Dude, I got it right here. I'm tracking my my macros in here, and I'm a healthier person because of it, right? So that's an app. There you go. So I'm not.
So I think that's what we need to realize. First of all, it's not going anywhere, right? Like we're not going to get into some kind of time machine and go back to an age before distraction, because there never was such an age. You know that Plato, 2,500 years ago, the Greek philosopher, talked about.
You're talking about the toy because I got kids, but okay.
Yeah, so he called it akrasia, the tendency to do things against our better interest. 2,500 years ago, people were saying, "Oh, the kids these days with their radical new technology called writing." I'm not making this up. Literally, the conversation between Socrates and Plato was how this written word was a terrible new technology. And then, years later, we said this in my generation. We said this about rap music, and we said this about
video
television.
games were causing people to kill each other,
heavy
right?
Metal. Yeah. The radio was considered a terrible technology. The bicycle was going to make women lascivious because they could go wherever they wanted. What a terrible technology. Literally every technology that people have said this about. So the point is, we got to keep our cool, relax, and realize that we can use these tools as opposed to letting them use us. And don't give a free pass to the old technology. If you walk into a sports bar during a big game and you turn off that TV, you are not going to leave with your life. And somehow that's not addictive. Somehow that's okay just because, it's been around for a few years. No, anything can be a distraction. The best intentions can be a distraction. We say, oh, work is a good thing. We should all go to work. We should be productive. Yeah, but if you mean to be with your kids and you're doing work, well, then you are distracted. If you're reading a book when you plan to work, then you're distracted. If you plan to read a book, but now you're, watching TV, you're distracted. So the idea here is to not blame and shame, moralize and medicalize, but rather ask yourself, how the hell do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your time? And if you don't decide in advance in this day and age, somebody's going to decide for you.
And if you don't follow through with it too, like if you say, I want to do this, but you're not following through on your intentions, right?
Yeah. So Nir, you're making a lot of assumptions. You're giving people the power. And sometimes when we do that, people don't use that power, because there's a lot of victimhood out there. Getting back to life coaching, there's 6 levels of energy. You have a catabolic state where you're a victim, or you have an anabolic state where you're responsible and you have concern and all that. So people out there, be conscious. That's what Nir is saying. If you're conscious of what you're doing, you will live a much more productive, I think, and happy life, because you're making that choice. There's nothing wrong with being on Facebook for 3 hours. Just know that you're on for 3 hours. Know that you want to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if it's not,
sounds a little icky, but I mean, maybe I'm shaming. I don't know.
But think about it. Like if you're on throughout the day, you need little breaks here, you need little energy pickups, and you're talking to your friend from college that you haven't seen in 20 years, and you're getting pictures from your daughter and all that. There's nothing wrong with that. Just understand that you're doing it and know that you're taking control of that. Nir, there's so many questions I really want to ask you this. It's a great book. Can you let's define a habit. We didn't talk about defining a habit. Then let's talk about the 4 phases, because I think that's important as well. Because I want people to walk through the habit and then the phases, because I want them to see, hey, is it a habit? Is it a good habit? Is it a bad habit? How can I stop? How can I start a good habit? So let's dive into
definitely
all of that.
Focus on the good there for sure.
Yeah, totally. So a habit is defined as an impulse to do a behavior with little or no conscious thought. It's about half of what you do every single day is done purely out of habit. Big difference from an addiction. An addiction is a persistent compulsive dependency on a behavior or substance that harms the user. So we would never want people to form addictions. The addictions are always bad. There's no such thing as a good addiction. Habits, however, we have many good habits. When you're driving a car, you can, if you've been driving for a while, you can drive the car while having a conversation or listening to a podcast. That's great, right? Because driving is on autopilot, it's on habit. So it's our brain's ability to offload the cognitive function, the thinking through a behavior when it becomes automatic. So when you first learn to drive a car, you're white knuckling it because you're so scared, you're paying attention to every little detail because you're learning it. But then when it becomes ingrained, it becomes a habit, you don't have to think about it anymore. You can do other things at the same time.
So you're basically, it's unconscious competence, basically. You're just unconsciously doing it, but you're really competent to do it. That's the stage of that habit that's still going very well. Okay.
Right. And it's how about do you half get there? Of your day, right? It's all kinds of things. Yeah. So it's through repetition, frequency, and through, so there's lots of research literature around how do you build good habits. What my specialty is around how do products design habits? How do you build a product or service that helps people exercise or save money or whatever the case might be? How can you build a product or service that gets people to engage with it out of habit?
4 phases. Number 1, everyone write this down, trigger. Number 2, action. Number 3, reward. And number 4, investment. Can we go through all 4 of those?
Sure. Yeah. So every habit forming product goes through these 4 steps. It's called the hooked model. And the hooked model, the idea is to connect your customer or user's pain point with your product with enough frequency to form a habit. So every hook starts with a trigger. We have external triggers and internal triggers. We talked about those a little bit earlier. So an external trigger might be a ping, ding, or ring on your phone, for example, that might tell you, hey, here's what to do next. Open this app, scroll this feed, look at this video, whatever the case might be. That would be an external trigger. Then the action is the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward, opening an app, scrolling a feed, whatever the case might be, some very simple action done in anticipation of reward. And then the variable reward is kind of the fuel of the hooked model. This comes from the work of B.F. Skinner, the father of operant conditioning. He took these pigeons and he put them in a little box. And today we call this a Skinner box. And these pigeons, every time they pecked at a little disc, they would receive a reward, a little food pellet. So very quickly, Skinner could train these pigeons to peck at the disc and get a reward as long as they were hungry. The experiment didn't work if the pigeons weren't hungry, just like you can't make your customers or users use the product if they don't have that internal trigger. If they don't want
Pigeons don't just like eating. They're not like Gino. Right?
Ouch.
They're not Italian.
So,
you know what I'm saying?
so as long as they were hungry, they would peck at the disc, right? So this is called operant conditioning. You know, if you have a puppy at home, you probably did this with your puppy. If you have kids, you probably do it with your kids. Do something and you get a treat. But then Skinner had a problem. You see, one day he walked into his lab and he realized he didn't have enough of these food pellets. He couldn't give the pigeons a food pellet every time they pecked at the disc. He could only give it to them once in a while. So sometimes they would peck at the disc, no reward. The next time they would peck at the disc, they would receive a reward. And what Skinner observed was that the rate of response, the number of times the pigeons pecked the disc, increased when the reward was given on a variable schedule of reinforcement. Why does this happen? Because variability, uncertainty, mystery spikes activity in a certain part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens that spurs this desirous reflex. So in all sorts of things that you find engaging, you're going to find a variable reward. Sports. Why do we obsess about some ball or puck bouncing around? We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know who's going to win. It's all about variability. What makes a book or a movie engaging? It's the unknown, right? The surefire way to make a boring movie or write a boring book is, I knew what was going to happen all along. It's all about uncertainty. Gambling, right? Why do people love going to casinos? It's games of chance. It's uncertainty, unpredictability. So in every habit-forming product, you will always find some element of variability. And then finally, the last step is the investment phase. The investment phase is where the user puts something into the product to make it better with use. And this is revolutionary. So this has never happened before, interactive technology, at least not on this massive scale, where now we can build products for a market of one. Meaning, Henry Ford is credited with saying that you can have any color of Model T as long as it's black, right? Why did he say that? Because he couldn't retool his factory to make, a red car for Jake and a blue car for Gino like that. He couldn't do that. It was too difficult to do. He only could make them black because that was the most efficient way to do it. Now that's changed. Now, if you look at companies, they are using data that you are giving them based on their usage. As you invest in the product, they are customizing the product just for you. So if you logged into my Facebook account, it wouldn't be interesting to you because it's been tailored to me based on my investment of data. That's never been done before. So now what's happened is that most products depreciate, right? You guys are in real estate. You know all about depreciation. Most products depreciates. Cars, clothing, furniture, everything loses value with wear and tear. Habit-forming products, get this, they do the opposite. They appreciate with use. The more you use them, the better they get. That is revolutionary. So if you can do that, if a user through trigger, action, reward, investment, through successive cycles, this is how products form our habits and shape our behaviors.
Whew, that is awesome, everybody. The next one is, this is important for all the entrepreneurs out there. I've got an amazing product. I'm going up against the status quo. You made some really great examples in the book, the typewriter, QWERTY, back in the 1840s. Inefficient. Even in America, the Fahrenheit versus the Celsius. Why is it so hard to switch to another product that may be superior?
Because it doesn't matter if you have a better product. I hate to tell you this, but it's a lie that the best product wins. It's not true, right? I know you've been told this, that build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. No. Like you said, the QWERTY keyboard. Do you know why our keyboards are designed the way they are? They're designed the way they are. It's why don't we just put A, B, C, D, E, F, G, in order? It's because back when typewriters were first invented, people typed faster than the mechanical gears could pound on the paper. So they had to find the least efficient layout of the letter so that people would slow down their typing so the keys would stop jamming up. So the keyboard that you use today, if your keyboard says QWERT, QWERTY, along the first line of letters, you are using the worst keyboard you could possibly use. But why don't we change? Because of habits. Because I would have to relearn now a different keyboard. There are different keyboards.
Too far down that road now.
Keyboard. Too far down the road. Once you got, and this is why having a monopoly of the mind is such an amazing business proposition. Why it's such a competitive moat, as Warren Buffett says. It's, think about Google, right? They did head-to-head comparisons between Google and the number search engine Bing, owned by Microsoft. And they found that when people didn't know which search engine they were using, they stripped out the branding. So it didn't say Google, didn't say Bing. It was a 50-50 preference split. And yet Google owns 90% of the search engine market. Why? Because when you feel the internal trigger of uncertainty, who sits there and says, which search engine should I use? Who makes the best search engine? No, you just Google it, right? Out of habit, with little or no conscious thought. So that's called the monopoly of the mind. When the consumer doesn't even ask if the competition is better. What a huge competitive advantage that is, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you, how do you, let's say I do have a better product. I want to create the better product. I have a better, where do we start? Do we have to start with that 4 phases and try to get them going on and try to show them that our product is better? Give me an idea of what I can do as an entrepreneur, because I have a better mousetrap than Jake over there. My product solves more problems. My product is more efficient. My product is cheaper. It's better. How do I get over that hump, that hurdle?
So do yourself a favor, get hooked, get the book. And that's a good first step.
Yes.
But so there's essentially 4 ways to break the competition's customer habit. So it's if you have the customer habit, you're in a very enviable position. But if you're a new market entrant, to unseat the incumbent is really, really hard. But there are 4 ways to do it. The first way is greater velocity through the hook. So if you can build a way to get people to go through your hook faster than your competitor's hook, that's one way. Let me give an example. Do you remember Blockbuster?
Mm-hmm.
You remember Blockbuster, right? The stores where you go get the DVDs.
Yeah.
Who killed Blockbuster? Netflix.
Netflix.
Right? Netflix destroyed them. Netflix, actually, it's funny. Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix. For $7 million. For $7 million. $7 million.
Sounds like a bargain today, right?
Oh my God. It was that would have been a lifesaver. They could have bought it for
different companies, they would have screwed it up.
Probably could be.
Yes.
So why did Netflix destroy Blockbuster single-handedly? Why? What happened? Well, think about the effort to get your movie, right? So this, by the way, I don't know if you remember this, but like back in the day, Netflix wasn't streaming. Netflix was that red envelope that they would put in the mail and mail you a DVD.
There's like a thing called Redbox now, right? It's very similar. Is that right?
No. Redbox, you still have to go.
You still have to go.
Like
Got it. Okay.
You have to go. So Blockbuster, you say, okay, you come home from work. What's the internal trigger? You're tired, fatigue, right? I just want to relax, watch a movie. Okay, let's go get a film. Okay, how do I do that? Got to get in my car, go to Blockbuster, find the movie. Oh shit, I forgot my membership card. They're out of stock of the movie. Okay, well, let me get a different movie. I'll come home. I'll put in the DVD player. Finally, I can watch it. Versus you come home from work, there's a red envelope on your kitchen counter, and all you have to do is put it in your DVD player. So what did they do? They made the velocity through the hook, trigger, action, reward, investment. The distance to get that need itch scratched was way shorter. That's it. That's how they broke the Blockbuster habit and how Netflix ultimately beat.
Are free samples a similar example, like to get them in early, or no? This is not really part of the habit. It's more of like an engagement thing early on.
Right. Exactly. So there's 3 parts to every successful business: growth, engagement, and monetization. Growth is how you get customers in the first place. So if a coupon, a free sample, that's a growth challenge because it only happens once. If you're lucky, you shouldn't keep giving people free stuff. Yeah. So it's a growth challenge. What we're talking about is really about engagement. How do you, once you have that customer, how do you keep them coming?
They're actually doing the action that's going to come bringing them back. Yeah.
Right. Right. So just to continue. So number 1 is greater velocity through the hook. Number 2 is to make the reward more rewarding. So if once in a while, you're absolutely right that if a product comes along and it's way better, the study's fine. There was a Harvard Business Review study that found that if you have a product that's better, it can't just be a little bit better. It has to be 9 times better to overcome the inertia of an existing habit. 9 times better.
People hate the change, right?
Hate change.
It's really hard to get people to change. Okay, so that's the second way. The third way is greater frequency through the hook. So we talked about velocity. That's how quickly you go through the 4-step. But if you can do it more often throughout the day, that's a big one. So let me give you an example here. I remember I was in Silicon Valley when Facebook bought Instagram, and they bought Instagram for $1 billion. And I remember that day, everybody laughed at Facebook. What a bunch of idiots. Oh my God, Zuckerberg paid $1 billion for this stupid photo app. What a ripoff. An evaluation of how much would Instagram be worth if it wasn't part of Facebook. Today, it would be worth over $50 billion. He got the steal of the century because Zuckerberg understood the power of habits, right? He understood that Instagram at the time was a mobile first product, meaning people could access it all day long on their phones, versus Facebook at the time was a desktop first product. And so that's why he knew it was such a competitive threat. He had to buy it because people were using it more frequently throughout the day. So that's number 3, greater frequency throughout the day. The last way to capture your competition's customer habit is to make it easier to get into the hook in the first place. So the example here is, do you know who used to be the number one enterprise software in the world? It used to be Microsoft Office. Okay. It no longer is. You know who the number one enterprise software maker in the world is today?
You're not.
Google Docs.
Oh, okay.
Google Docs is the most widely used.
Totally.
Makes sense, right? But it used to be Microsoft Office. Well, how did Google Docs beat Microsoft Office? Google Docs sucked at first. It was terrible. It did a fraction of what Microsoft Office can do. Well, here's what they did, right? They made it easier to start using the product. Because remember, Microsoft Office, you had to go buy the disks and you had to pay money. Well, Google Docs came along and said, hey, it's free. So it was easier to start
push
using
Dropbox out of the way too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In some ways, that's their big competition is Google Drive. So those are the 4 ways: velocity, frequency, make the reward more rewarding, and easier entry into the hook.
Before we get to the short answers, I touched about the morality of manipulation. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because sometimes it is, I mean, as far as getting good habits, we want that, but sometimes these companies do it deceptively and immoral. Can we get into that real quick?
Yeah. So I would start by saying there's 2 kinds of manipulation. First of all, anytime you are trying to design a behavior, that is a form of manipulation. Yeah. Okay. Every form of design, whether it's graphic design, usability design, heck, interior design is a form of manipulation. You are shaping customer behavior. But there's 2 kinds of manipulation. There's what we call persuasion, which is helping people do things they want to do. And then there's coercion, getting people to do things they don't want to do. The difference is one word, and that one word is regret. So if you persuade people to do something they themselves want to do, exercise more, get into a home that's going to be great for them, eat right, whatever it could be, that's persuasion because it's something the customer themselves wants to do. And we should use these techniques to make those behaviors more likely to occur. But if you are coercing people, right, where that later they regret using your product, not only is that unethical, but they're going to tell, in this day and age, they're going to tell everybody they know not to do business with you on social media and say, stay away from that company. So it's not in your interest to get people to do things they regret. It's not in your interest to coerce people. We want to persuade them. That's really what these tactics are for.
One more question before we get to the short answer. So, I know you hear like Elon Musk talk about like the dangers of like AI and things like that. What are the dangers of, and you use the term monopoly of the mind. What are the dangers of this politically if, say Facebook, a government, entity ever really got into bed together? Because it seems like it could be a very slippery slope.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm much more concerned about governments utilizing these tools than I am about people, private individuals. People have been, talking crap for millennia. That's nothing new, right? Like your crazy Uncle Joe says some crazy conspiracy theory. All right, well, he's entitled to his opinion. And people, I think, are pretty darn good at by and large, maybe one individual or another is persuaded here or there to believe one thing or another, but by and large, we're pretty good. People aren't quite as dumb as I think some elites think that we are. So I'm not really concerned about individuals, spreading fake news. What I'm concerned about is officials spreading misinformation, disinformation. That's where it's dangerous. And we know now that, during most of the misinformation around the whole COVID crisis came from like 8 people. It all stemmed from, and some of them were government officials. And that's what worries me is when this kind of technology, like if you see what's happening in China. Right. China is very scary in that it's they control the media. That's a much more dangerous situation.
All right, let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsor.
Are you looking for ways to improve your life?
Here at Jake and Gino, our mission is to empower students through financial education and the vehicle of multifamily investing.
Yes, Jake. We agree that a person with financial intelligence can change the world for the better.
We've created our proprietary 3-step framework, buy right, manage right, and finance right, that we teach to our community. This framework, along with education, our one-on-one mentorship, on-site boot camps, and the amazing community, has propelled our students to massive success.
We've all been there. We've had so many students that have been able to shift their mindset, overcome limiting beliefs, and set a clear path to achieve their goals. Whether you're currently fixing and flipping, wholesaling, or buying single-family rentals, and you know that multifamily investing is the right vehicle for you, I encourage you to visit jakeandgino.com/apply to schedule your complimentary consultation with our team. And I want to let you know this isn't a high-pressure sales call. It's really just a discovery call to get to know each other better and see if we're a good fit for working together. And if for any reason we're not a good fit, our team has tons of resources we will share with you to help you along your journey.
If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels, go to jakeandgino.com/apply and schedule your call now. All right, gang, we're back. So I love asking everybody, what is your best personal habit for success? Coming from the habit man here.
My best personal habit is deciding in advance how I want to spend my time and attention. That is my most precious resource. That's my only resource, right? I don't work with my hands. I don't build stuff. I make stuff on my computer, right? I think of things and I research things. So it's it's deciding in advance how I want to spend my time and attention.
You have the power. It is a choice for sure. Any tips for someone starting to scale a business to really get people engaged? Because I think it's, you have an idea, you start the process, but what's a tip for someone early on in their scaling process to get that engagement?
So I think it's really about understanding more than just what people tell you. I think it's really easy when people think, well, what should I do, right? How should I improve my product or service? How should I innovate? That's an age-old question. And so the answer can come from the hippo. You know who the hippo is? The highest paid person's opinion. That's typically what most people do. If you work in an office, hey boss, what should we do? Okay, do what he or she says. Great. Well, that's not really good, because who says that he or she is such a genius? So you say, oh no, let's talk to the customers, right? But many times when you ask people what they want, they'll say they want one thing, but they do something else. Mm-hmm. So that's not always the great place to ask. What you need to do is to understand some fundamentals around consumer psychology, because people will say they want one thing and they'll behave completely differently. So if you understand how the mind works, if you understand, this is not new stuff. This is 50, 60-year-old consumer psychology research. It's been around a very long time. So knowing some basic concepts of consumer psychology really does help you in business. And this isn't in, any kind of, neuro-linguistic programming, BS type stuff. This is like very well-established, basics like operant conditioning, variable rewards, this kind of stuff. Once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it because it's everywhere.
Any book recommendations for the folks out there? Anything that you've read in the last year that would add value to someone else's life?
Yeah, I think a great book that I highly recommend is called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Factfulness. And this is a great book. I think especially in these times that so many of us feel so pessimistic. If you ask the average person, they'll tell you this is the worst time in history. It's such a common
we
belief,
couldn't get vinegar for like 2 weeks, man. My world was coming apart. All right.
There you go.
Target and Kroger were both out. I was like, what the hell?
And do they have it back?
We got the vinegar. We're okay. All right. We're okay. And I got some malt vinegar too for my potatoes. So we're going to be all right.
I would have thought like Little Debbie's, something, not
See,
vinegar,
Jake's not Italian.
Dude, Little Debbie lasts forever here. So,
dude, get some red wine, let it go bad. And there's your vinegar. You don't say, we have to like,
So Factfulness, it's amazing. So this guy, Hans Rosling, he actually recently passed away. He asked professors, right, the most educated people in the country, he asked them to take a test on the state of the world, right? How is democracy doing? How is health around the world doing? How is education doing? How is, all these, even the environment, all these metrics of how the world is doing. And he asked them to fill out, how good, how bad things were going on this evaluation. And it turns out that chimpanzees would have done better at accurately portraying or having an accurate personification of the world than, these educated elites, that the world is way better than most people think. And so that's why I love this book, Factfulness, because it's a wake-up call that, hey, things are actually getting better by and large.
And much better. And those are our biases. I read the book. I read about half of it. And it's one of those books, like my partner that likes Atlas Shrugged, to put it down. You start reading it, you start getting frustrated because you're like, it's so obvious that wow. I mean, it's an amazing book, everybody. Pick it up and read it. It's an awesome book.
It's a really good one. I'm glad you liked it.
You can get your steak in about an hour, and it's right to your doorstep, man. We got a lot of conveniences in this world, right? So, what project are you excited about right now?
What project am I excited about? You know, I'm really excited about the prospect of helping people become indistractable. I mean, it's just improved my life in so many ways. I have a better relationship with my family. I spend more quality time with my daughter. I'm more productive at work. There's no facet of your life that is not affected by your ability to decide for yourself how you spend your time and attention. And so as opposed to this narrative that like, we're all getting addicted to technology, it's hijacking our brains, which is complete rubbish. It's totally disempowering.
It's on you.
I want to empower people.
Yeah.
It's up to you to make the choice.
It's not, well, let me be very clear. It's not your fault. Okay. It's not your fault. You didn't invent Facebook. You didn't invent the iPhone.
That was from Good Will Hunting.
What's that?
That's a quote from Good Will Hunting. No, he goes, it's not your fault. It's not your fault, man. And he starts crying in the hug and everything. It's great.
Sorry,
never mind. Sorry. It's okay.
So I would say it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, make the choice is all I'm saying. So before we shut this down, give me not the example, but your sort of outlook and how the phone is used in your life. Like, because for myself in my house, it stays in my office 80% of the time, so that when I leave the office, it's more like a landline. I try to keep it kind of fixed unless I go out. And that's sort of my take on it. Works well for me. It does not come to my bedroom. It stays down, and I can see it when I'm in the space. So maybe share with us how you approach that.
Yeah. So this is what the whole book of Indistractable is about. It's about deciding for yourself what's traction, what's distraction, and it's not just the technologies, right? You can get distracted, like I said, by
100%
things that you think are productive.
It's just
right?
it's just I think it's something that's top of mind for folks, right?
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Yeah.
So so it's really there's 4 steps to becoming indistractable. There's mastering the internal triggers, which we talked about earlier. If you don't have tactics to deal with that discomfort, right? Like, we have to understand the reason people don't follow through on their goals is 99% of the time because they don't feel like it, right? I don't feel like exercising. I don't feel like making those sales calls. I don't feel like it. That's the number one reason people don't follow through. It's feelings, guys. Feelings. We have to know what to do with those feelings. And you don't control your feelings. This is a big misconception. You don't control your feelings. You only control what you do in response to those feelings, hence the term responsibility, right? Once you feel that urge, it's too late. You already felt it. You have to know what you will do in response to those feelings. So if every time you feel bored, you turn on the TV, every time you feel lonely, you check Facebook, every time you feel uncertain, you check email. If you don't know how to deal with that underlying feeling, you're always going to get distracted by one thing or another. So that's the first step.
Gino, take us home, big doggy.
So Nir Eyal, at a young age, was very similar to Gino. Back then, we called it husky. We weren't clinically obese. Okay, we just weighed a little bit more. There's nothing wrong. I had a 36-inch waist. Now I'm down to 32.
Those are the pants your mom bought you. We were in Huskies, right?
We're husky back then, right? Just like Blockbuster. Husky went away with Blockbuster. Now we're clinically obese. Everybody, we were fat back then. I think
husky sounded better than clinically obese, personally, but
I was like big boned. I always told myself big boned.
Big bone. I was never called big bone. I was just like, there's so many words in Italian. Actually, it was the thing that we looked upon, because 100 years ago, if you're heavy 100 years ago, that means you're healthy. Nowadays, it seems like it's the opposite. Exactly. True. So going through that, working through Silicon Valley, I mean, writing the book Hooked, I mean, honestly, everybody, I think you really need to pick the book up, and hopefully we'll have Nir on to go over his book Indistractable, because there are so many things in psychology. And the biggest takeaway that I've taken from this, Jake, is empowering. We have the learning zone and the performance zone. We need to be in our learning zone, and we need to know how to get into that learning zone and to be able to recapture our time. And it's all about us taking those positive actions. I think a tool is not bad in and of itself. It's how we utilize the tool. And I think, like Nir said, we're living in one of the best times ever. I mean, it's an amazing time. It's all the way people see the world as they are, not as it is. Once you start seeing as it truly is, reading Hans's book and reading Hooked and Indistractable, it will give you the tools to start taking control and possibly start creating those positive habits in our lives.
That that was a genius quote. Where is that yours, or did you get that from somewhere? That you said people see the world as they are, not as it is. That is awesome. Is that you?
That was from Dr. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits. I mean, he's written so many. It's really paradigms, maps of our lives, the way we see.
Genius.
Yeah, well, it's true, right? Because I always tell my wife this quote in life coaching: what people say is about them. What you hear is about you. We all have a way to react. Now, you talk about the stimulus and the response. In Covey's book, he talks about that. We're in the animal kingdom. Usually animals, they have a response to a stimuli. We have control between that stimulus and that response. There's time in between. How do you react? Right. It's all about having, I guess, positive physiology, taking control of that. And we can have that. But most people have abdicated that. They're victims. Right. It's not my fault. Yes, you can stimulate. You can respond in any way you'd like. And Jake used the word triggered. If you want to be triggered, fine. I can't trigger you. You can only trigger yourself. That's the way you respond. Once you realize that, hooked will make
say that again though, because so many people probably disagree with that.
They could disagree with me, but I can't. I just feel a certain way.
No. I just want Gino. Yeah, that's why I wanted you to say it again, because so many people say you triggered me. You did it.
Think about that.
It's placing the blame, and it's not taking responsibility for yourself. So that's
a stimulus response. I'm telling you that if I stimulate you,
you did it to me, Gino.
Exactly.
You're triggering me right now.
Control your emotions. Your emotions are amazing. You have higher emotions. You're gonna have a higher level of intelligence. You have lower emotions, lower level of intelligence. It's all about what Nir's been talking about this last 45 minutes. It's your ability to control your life, to get onto Facebook.
And you're going to feel so much more free if you're empowering yourself to make those choices versus it's picking a path, and you're making the choice in your life, and you're dictating versus letting life come at you. It's a mindset shift.
And Jake, one last thing. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to read the book. I mean, we're all entrepreneurs out there. Everyone listening to this, we're buying multifamily. We're trying to build businesses. How do you build a better business? You want to hook them the moral way, the just way. You want to be able to persuade them to use your product, because we have the Jake and Gino community. We're out there educating people to buy multifamily. We want them to use our educational products. How do we do that? Well, here it is. Read the book, everybody.
All right. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you, Nir?
I appreciate it. So my website is nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name. So that's Nir and far, nirandfar.com. And that's the best place.
All right. So everyone on, multifamily investors, a lot of the folks that listen to the show, give us a way to hook folks on apartment living. What's a way to keep them in the units? What do we need to do here to keep them coming back for more?
Yeah. I think the biggest opportunity is the investment phase, right? It's about learning about your customers, knowing about their tastes and preferences. How many people don't bother to know anything about their customers? So when you look at examples of companies that do it really well, like, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, they're collecting data about you. How many of us are collecting data that people want to give us, right? I'm not talking about, secret information. I'm talking about the kind of information that it would be pleasant for them to interact with you, and their kids' names, their hobbies, their interests, what team they cheer for. This kind of investment is what relationships are built on.
So like NPS scores, is that a great start? Or
well, NPS is nice. It's a lagging indicator, right? It's something that after the fact,
you say even before that.
Would you? Yeah. Like this, some of it is common courtesy, which I think people forget. But you can make offline products habit forming by collecting this kind of data and managing the relationships in such a way. And by the way, you can use technology to facilitate this. It's amazing to me how few people do this. I'm thinking about my barber, right? You can say what you want about my haircut, but I go to the same barber all the time.
That's solid.
It's not bad. All right, thanks. I appreciate it. But the reason I do, I used to go to a different barber, and every time I would sit down in the chair, he would ask, okay, well, how do you want to cut your hair? I've been here 20 times. You still don't know how to cut my hair? It's the same thing. Didn't ask for the name of my daughter. Doesn't ask what I do for a living. Like, just cut my hair, give me my money, and gone. After a while, I went to somebody else, and she remembers everything about me. She knows my name. She knows my daughter's name. She knows what I do. She knows how I like my haircut. Well, who do you think I'm going to go back to? Mm-hmm. Right? The person who's invested in that relationship. She has personal information about me that she has taken into her memory banks. The beauty is we can use technology to do this at scale too. You can do this for hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people by using that information to make the product or service better the more the customer interacts with you.
What he doesn't realize is that his previous barber was catering to guys like me. Like, I want to get in, I want to tell him so he gets it right, and I want to be very clear, and I don't want you to talk to me. I don't want you to know my kid's name.
I don't want
a quiet time, and I just want to cut. And let's not have the chit chat. Just do the work, and let's be. Yeah, I'm just kidding, man. Gino, you're gonna say something.
No, you're totally right.
I thought I recapped the show. I thought the show was supposed to be over like 10 minutes ago. I guess we can keep going. I mean,
it's just curious. He can't help himself.
This has been awesome. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for taking the time out. And like I said, we're looking forward to having you back on. It's been a great podcast, everybody. Go back and listen to it, because we're all out there trying to be entrepreneurs. We're all out trying to grow our companies and have people utilize our great products out there. So once again, thanks
guys.
Appreciate it.
See you guys.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Take care.